Skyrim is the game of all time. That's it, it's the game. Its enormous success is in part due to its universal appeal. No matter who you are, or what age you are, or where you're from, there's a way for you to enjoy this world and the stories that make it up. Skyrim was released in 2011, and this was a time where you would still hear the idea that girls don't play video games, and the product was marketed more towards a male audience. It wasn't really as open a space for female gamers. Technically, even though if we're being for real, women have been playing video games since video games have existed. When my mom was pregnant with me, she was playing Diablo 1, so you could say that I even started before I was born. That said, for girls that maybe didn't have immediate access to games like I did, and they sort of believed more in the idea that it was a hobby for boys, games needed to have something that would specifically appeal to a female audience. Think of games that generally always seem to have like a bigger female fan base, something like The Sims or Stardew Valley or even Animal Crossing. What is it that those games have that made them so popular with girls, and how is Skyrim similar to them? Today we're going to talk about why girls love Skyrim. Before we get started, hi, my name is Angelika. I am a girl gamer. A gamer girl. That is part of the secret to being able to interpret the Elder Scrolls, in case you didn't know. So I think that when it comes to the Elder Scrolls franchise in general, it's always been one of the more appealing game series for women. I also think that in the different games in the series, they all had different things that did grip a female audience, and it's worth discussing that in their own separate videos, but for today, I want to focus on Skyrim. I remember going to school, and being somebody whose main hobby was video games, that was all that I wanted to talk about. I was insufferable. But with my friends that were girls, I noticed that even if they weren't really into games at all, or if they only played stuff like The Sims, the one other game that they would play was always Skyrim. And I mean, like, they really played it, like they clocked in their hours, and they knew their shit too, like I'm talking about the lore and everything. They would really dig into the world, like there was actual interest there. Over the years, when speaking to other women about games, Skyrim came up all the time, and this got me thinking, why? What is the science behind Skyrim having such a huge female audience? I want to preface this by saying that, of course, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, you're going to like what you're going to like. Fantasy as a genre is widely appealing across the board, and some people would never touch it altogether. So I think that for, the older generation of female gamers, they don't necessarily need these things that I'm going to list here for a game to appeal to them. By the time that Skyrim was out, these women would have already figured out what they like or don't like, and they'd probably been playing games for a decade or two prior to its release. There are also outliers, of course, in the younger generation, like myself. If you grew up in a household where games in general just weren't viewed as strictly a boy thing, these are more so observations that I've made, particularly with a younger female audience, one that perhaps didn't have the same access that I did, or ones that grew up with the notion that girls don't play games. And for the first of these observations, we have to go all the way back to the beginning of the game, more specifically, the character creation. It goes without saying that it certainly helps that you can be either a man or a woman in the game, and yes, there are many games out there, RPGs, where you're given just like a main character like The Witcher and you don't get a choice in the matter, and those games also have a large female fan base, but that's for different reasons. And of course, that said, there are many such games where you can play as a female character, and they might not be as popular with women, so why Skyrim in particular? Well, aside from the fact that you as a female character can be the big hero who saves the world, women in general have their place and are an integral part of the story in Skyrim. The way in which women are written into the world here does not by any means feel forced. They are a natural and organic part of Skyrim who play important parts through various questlines in the game, including, of course, the main questline. In Skyrim, there isn't really the idea of traditional gender roles for the most part, but rather a recognition that Skyrim is a really tough place to live in, and, they're going through a rough time as well with the dragon crisis and the Civil War and whatnot, so women are valued as warriors just as much as men. Particularly the native Nords are depicted as these strong women who do what they can to survive, fight alongside the men, and there isn't any divide in their society that limits either gender from participating in any part of the world. That said, the strength of these women isn't exaggerated. It feels realistic to the setting, and you have some really memorable characters here. They're really likable, for the most part, but I mean, even the antagonists are well written and make you really care about their story. Aside from Delphine, nobody cares about Delphine. I also like that being a warrior who goes out and fights isn't the only thing that makes the women strong, or it isn't the only thing that's valued in that society. As I mentioned, Skyrim is a really tough place to survive in, and in various instances, other roles that women take on in this world are highlighted as difficult and important, whether it's a merchant with a child just trying to make a living, or a farmer working through harsh conditions, or even a jarl of a city. For a girl playing the game, you yourself feel like a natural and important part of the world, making it a much more immersive experience. I've heard this said by some women that they can't really feel immersed in a game where they have to play as a male protagonist, and I've also heard the opposite said by some men, where they just don't feel immersed in a game where they have to play as a female protagonist. So it's really good when RPGs do give you the option to be either one. Speaking of highlighting the different strengths, I think that the Daedric princes are a really interesting one to mention here. When it comes to the Daedric princes, they don't actually have a set gender, but rather they choose the gender that they wish to present themselves as. It's interesting how a lot of them have chosen to appear female, because whatever their domain, they feel that as female, the message is more powerful and perhaps inspires more devotion, a formidable feminine energy. Aside from the role that women play in Skyrim, I think that another very appealing factor for girls and women is that a big part of the gameplay involves socializing with NPCs, building relationships or tearing them down, and in general having to communicate to progress. And I'm not saying that this is like an exclusively girly thing, like men hate to communicate. No, that's not it at all. But it is true for myself, and it is something that I've noticed. Games that have this social aspect in terms of having to interact and go through dialogue or build relationships have had more success with a female fan base. I keep bringing The Sims up as an example, but here relationships are a core part of gameplay. It's what it's all about. You can make friends, lovers, enemies, live out your dramatic telenovela dreams, and then burn it all down. Skyrim pretty much lets you do all of that. Like, one thing that really works is the whole marriage concept in Skyrim, that you can go acquire this amulet of Mara and find yourself a husband or a wife. Could this concept have been better explored in Skyrim and perhaps have had a bit more depth to it? Yes. Like a lot of other things in Skyrim. But that does not take away from the fact that it's cool that it's there. What's not cool, however, is this.
Sorry, lass. I've got important things to do. We'll speak another time.
Brynjolf is like Serana, but for the girls. I will note though that it would have probably been more appealing if there was romance in the game. Now there actually is romance between NPCs, but it's not something that you yourself can directly participate in. And marriage in the game isn't really romantic. It's more like a companionship, but there really isn't any passion there. I think that another really noteworthy thing here is the focus that's in the game on environments other than dungeons and epic locations. More specifically, cozy interiors. Now, I'm not saying that men can't like cozy interiors. You all live in caves. No. But have you ever heard the term a woman's touch? When it comes to interior decor, I think that women in general are just better at it, or at least they're more drawn to it. I have yet to meet a man who will patiently walk through the scented candle and decorative pillow aisle in the supermarket without complaining the whole time and wanting to go home. Those aisles were really designed for the girlfriends and the wives. Like, in general, it's just more of a girl thing. So having this focus on cozy spaces in Skyrim, beautiful furniture, curtains, rugs or carpets, plants, nicely laid out silverware and other decor, as a woman you just appreciate that sort of thing a lot more. But Skyrim of course takes these environments a step further with player housing, and later in the Hearthfire expansion a more customizable player housing. Just having your own house where you can place your treasures and things you find on display, where your spouse and adopted children can live, kind of like The Sims. A stripped back version, sure, but this is the closest that you can have in an RPG, really. I briefly want to mention clothing and jewelry here, of course. I have done in-depth videos on the topic if you want to check them out, but having the option to dress up nicely for roleplay purposes and having nice jewelry to go with it, and the fact that the outfits have their feminine versions for female characters, that kind of thing. Meeting other people in the world who are dressed all in different clothing, not armor, specifically clothing. Now, again, we have talked about how Skyrim has a lot less options in terms of clothing compared to its predecessors, but I do think that they went hard on the jewelry. And on that note, the design of the armor for the female body type is great in my opinion. It doesn't leave your character exposed. Just as a rule in some games, we've seen this in the past, like armor would often be a lot more exposed on women than it is on men. And you know, in some cases I actually don't mind it, but that said, in Skyrim I like that it actually looks like armor that could protect you, but it's still feminine. This gives a lot of room and inspiration for cosplay as well, which I think for drawing in a female audience is a major plus. There is also, of course, the modding community. Now, I have said personally that I don't play with mods. I know, don't kill me. But I have a great appreciation for the modding community, and I recognize its value in making the game appeal to an even wider audience. Like, mods can be literally anything. And even just on the topic of customization, there are clothing mods, character customization mods, housing mods, everything to further enhance the parts of the game that already appealed to women. At the end of the day, all of the above things can of course be enjoyed by both men and women, by everybody, and it's not to say that women don't enjoy games that don't have any of these elements. Everyone is different, and there's also just individual interests and personal preferences that, you know, get factored into all of that. Some people really like dragons, other people really like the fact that you can kill people and get paid for it, you know, different strokes. But I think that it's also okay to recognize that men and women are different, and you know, some things are just more attractive for one side than the other. Some things might grab a man's attention before a woman's, etc. This is again with the context that some girls growing up didn't really get the chance to find out what they like, and maybe because their parents were also of the opinion that games are for boys, you know, maybe they didn't have a brother or a parent who were interested in it, and that meant that they could only really discover games through more typically girly things. I think Skyrim is great in that it truly has something for everybody, and I say this as someone that has criticized Skyrim a lot because I do think that it lacks in a lot of ways, especially if you go to compare it with its predecessors. But I can't really think of a scenario where somebody feels awkward playing it, other than if you're someone who just really hates RPGs. But really having all of these elements that we went through in this video, I truly think that this is a big reason why Skyrim has been re-released 1,000 times for different platforms. And you know, there's even a Skyrim for the Alexa. But that's it, that's my take and my perspective on why girls like Skyrim, or why they love Skyrim. Is that what I called the video? Anyways, I really hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. As always, huge thanks to all of my channel members. I also really appreciate all of your support, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Be seeing you, bye!